Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm really excited to talk about something a little bit different, recruiter branding, and I'm going to explain why I want all of you to focus on that. I'm going to do a quick survey. How many people in the room think that their recruiters are branded brilliantly and are attracting all sorts of talent because of how awesome they are? Yeah, that's what I thought. What I want to talk about today is the fact that we all get branding right now. You know, brand or be branded is something I always say. If you're not out branding your company, we know that you're actually saying one of three things. Either you're not very tech savvy, not good. You've got nothing interesting to say about your company and working there, not good. Or you basically have something to hide, really not good. So we are all caught up, I think, and I'm happy to see that people understand the power of employer brand and that we have to do it. We're also starting to learn about talent brand, and we're going to talk about the distinction in a minute here. But I want you to take the next 10, 15 minutes to think about the real power of recruiter brand, which is a little different. So to give you an idea of where I got excited about this, is the fact that CAREEREALISM, the site that I mentioned, I started that site in 2009 when I saw the recession coming. I thought there's an opportunity here to change the way people look at their careers. We all have golden handcuffs for a very long time in society. We believed we worked for employers. And then you have a recession and people think, I don't like how this feels, this lack of security, this lack of control over my future. And so we've been working really hard, especially at CAREEREALISM, to empower people to stop thinking like employees and start thinking like businesses of one. And what do we teach them? You got to brand your business of one. How many people in this room have heard the term personal branding once or twice? Don't we expect all of our candidates to personal brand themselves for us? Of course we do. And that's a great thing because it helps us better understand them, right? We're buying a service from them. We want to understand them. But in the process of doing that, folks, we created something called a sophisticated job seeker. And those sophisticated job seekers are now working with employers, not for them. And when you work with an employer, you're a partner. And they expect more from you. And that's what this is really about. Now, you've heard several times today, and it cannot be more true. Our survey results show it, and I will show you in a minute. They want to talk to a person, not a company. Yes, they want to know what your company does. They want to understand your employer brand. But when they first reach out to you to start that relationship, they want to talk to another human being. So let's look at that. We get over 1 million visitors per month at CAREEREALISM, and we surveyed over 1,600 of them responded, and we got some really interesting information. 89% of our folks said they're looking for a new job, and they are not looking on job boards. Not the sophisticated job seeker. In fact, 94% of them told us it would be really helpful if there was such a thing as a recruiter directory. Remember that number. I'm going to share something with you at the end. A recruiter directory, a place to go find recruiters who recruit based on industry and skill set. 33% said the hardest thing to do is to find someone to talk to, a contact information. And 22% said the hardest thing was understanding the company culture. Think about that. Job seekers never did this before. They went to a job board, they tried to find things that fit, they fill out an application, and they cross their fingers and hope that somebody contacted them. This is a very different person that we're dealing with these days. And I think that's a good thing. In fact, job seekers are consumers. Now, we've heard that consumer term, hey, they buy our products and services. That is absolutely true. And you heard amazing examples today from Salesforce and Dell and others about that. But I want you to think about this in a different way. Job seekers mimic consumer behavior. How many of you have bought something in the last year or two that cost over $500? Okay. How many of you got on the internet and searched and did research about what you were going to buy before you did it? Why'd you do that? Go ahead. All right, why'd you do it?
Good decision.
Make an informed decision, a good decision. I don't want to feel cheated, right? I don't trust the yell and sell anymore of commercials. I'm going to go do my own homework. Well, job seekers, same exact thing. They literally mimic the behavior. Let's look at that data. 81% of job seekers research you, and then they decide if they're going to apply to your company. Many of them choose to follow you for a while first, monitor pages and see what you think. They will wait over a month or two before they decide to apply. Why are they doing that? Gathering data, processing, being more informed. That's a big decision to switch careers, to switch jobs, to go to another company. You really don't want to switch every 6 months. right? We say every job is temporary at Careeralism, but we'd like to stay there a little bit longer. 100% said they expect you to have a dedicated career site. This is a really amazing piece of data here, folks. They said if they can't find a careers page on your website, they don't see you as a legitimate company. That's crazy, right? 64% expect you to have a Glassdoor profile. That'll be 100% within a year. You are seeing that today, right? And 26% told us they want an enhanced Glassdoor profile, the extra information, the content, right? That's crazy. No excuses. We can't get away from it anymore. They expect this from you or they won't bother to apply. We can't get away from it. So great, we know we need to do employer brand. That takes strategy. We're seeing some great insights today on how to build that, but that's probably not something we can all run back to today or even Monday or even a week from now and implement on the spot, right? We know we need to do this right, tell our story properly. But I've got some good news about that. There's something you can do right now to bridge the gap. That's recruiter branding. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk about the difference between talent brand and recruiter brand, and this is where this really falls in between, okay? So an employer brand is what the company sees, what it's like to work at that company. That's usually coming from executive leadership, right? They have a vision about who we are, what we believe in, what kind of people we want as part of our community and our tribe, what that looks like. And you go out and you build an employer brand in hopes of what? You will attract that type of talent. The other spectrum of that is something called the talent brand. That's what your actual employees say it's like to work at that company. It's very important that those messages be consistent, don't you think? What happens if you're saying one thing at the employer brand level, but talent saying something else? So lots of us are trying to pay attention to how to make that synergistic. And the solution lies in the recruiter brand. You know why? Because the recruiter is the perfect union. They are an employee, and they represent the employer. And when your recruiters really understand that and internalize that and build their own personal brand to represent that, you can actually rise above the noise. Because I gotta be honest, how are you gonna compete when everybody's out there producing content about what it's like to work at their company? What are you gonna do with the information overload? What's gonna be the difference? What's going to get sticky and traction with candidates? A person. A person's going to do it. A recruiter. And their brand. So we decided to study this some more. And we asked our sophisticated job seekers at Careeralism, what are you looking for in a recruiter brand? What qualifies as a good recruiter brand? And they said, first of all, I want proof of your recruiting experience. We've all been recruited before, or we've been sourced before. How many people have been sourced by a bad recruiter before? Come on, throw it out there. What are some of the things that bad recruiters do?
Spam you when you're not qualified.
Right. Spam you when you're not qualified. They tell you you're really interested and then they never follow up with you, right? I heard more. Keep going. Template emails. I've got the perfect job for you. Really, you've never met me. You got the perfect job for me. It's that yell and sell mentality that we find so, ooh, nails on a chalkboard. I need a shower after kind of thing. Gross, right? So we got to fix that. And so what do you got to do? You've got a brand that is, yes, I'm using the word authentic. I like to say accurate and compelling, but really this is the word that defines it. We heard transparency today, right, in the recruiting process. And then we need an opportunity for a personal relationship. So recruiters have to start to think about the fact that you're not running out there and saying, I got to talk to you, never calling back. I'm being more mindful. The best way I heard it described recently, I was interviewing an amazing recruiter at Yahoo. And she came from the luxury brand market, had never recruited before. She came from the luxury brand market. She said, I came into recruiting and I said, I'm going to give every candidate a VIP experience. She stalks her candidates. She researches them. She sends them long personalized emails telling them that she studied them and she loves that they do underwater basket weaving and this or that or the other thing. And then she said, I'd like to have a conversation with you and explore where you're going in your career. I'm not sure we even have anything for you. I just want to have a conversation with you. Doesn't that feel better, more real, more accurate? Wouldn't you be more likely to have a conversation? I know this to be true because I was on an airplane recently and I listened to a software developer, I will not name the name of the company, 3 rows up from me, tell me he gets 17 calls a week. 17 calls a week. Doesn't take any of them. He said, on the rare occasion I take one, it's because they don't try to pitch me. They just want to get to know me for future opportunities. He's like, I like that. I like that. A couple of them I've even referred my friends to. Because I never know, and this is the point I want you to remember, every job is temporary, because I never know when I'm going to wake up and all of a sudden not love my job anymore. Because that day will happen. And when that day happens, I need to know the good recruiters, because I need to reach out to them and say, I'm ready now. That's the power of recruiter branding. So, how do you develop a recruiter brand? Well, again, great news. You can do it right away. What you want to do is reinforce your messaging, tell your story, and share your expertise. We did a survey at CAREEREALISM asking them what they wanted to know. The number one thing they wanted to know about recruiters were, have they recruited for my skill set before? Do they really know my skill set, what I'm about? They wanted to know their own career progression, whether or not the recruiter had actually advanced their own career. Pretty interesting. And then they wanted to know weird stuff, like your gender, your ethnicity. What's that about? They even said age. We went, oh my gosh, candidates are being discriminatory. That's horrible. Who does that? Right? Guess what? You know why they really wanted to know that stuff? To figure out a strategy to reach out and talk to you. Could they find a point of connection? Could they bond with you in some way? Did you look like somebody they could relate to? Because what did I say? You work for the company. You're part of the talent brand and the employer brand. They just want to know more. All right, I'm going to give you an example. So I mentioned that 94%. As a result of all this research that we've done in the last year over at CAREEREALISM, we have just launched the first recruiter directory. And recruiters are able to fill out profiles for free. And we're doing this to educate them, to teach recruiters what they should be sharing about themselves. So this is Harold Miller. He is a recruiter for Novartis, very large company that you're familiar with. And what you see is all the info over there. First of all, what did talent tell us? Well, they'd like all your contact information in one place. How do I get a hold of you? How do I check you out? How do I click on the various things, like the careers page, like the Glassdoor pages? Put it someplace so I can look at it all at once instead of having to hunt for it. Job seekers are sophisticated but also a little lazy, right? And then here's the really interesting thing. For job candidates, they want you to tell them what's the best way to contact you. They want to know what will disqualify me from getting hired. I know that's a careful thing to navigate, but you know, what things wouldn't impress the recruiter? What would impress the recruiter? I know this is hard to see. What skills are you particularly struggling to find talent for? They want you to share this stuff with them. Think about that. Wouldn't it be easier for them to write you an introduction email or a cover letter if they actually had that information? And then on the recruiter's perspective, what's your favorite quote? What do you do in your free time? In one sentence, why do you like working for the company? And what makes your company fun? How do they have fun on a regular basis? And if you had to sum up your company in a few words, what would you describe it as? They want to hear this in your voice. This is really important content that recruiters are going to have to start to get out there. You're not going to be able to get around it going forward. The best talent sees itself as a professional, and it wants to work with an equal or greater professional when it comes to recruiting. So this is the new, sorry gang, this is the new thing that we got to adapt to. We know we already need employer branding. Now you got to take it a step further. And here's the great news. You heard about snackable. I was so excited when I heard snackable content from Salesforce. That really is the future because we are going to have to start to engage our talent in helping us recruit. In fact, I had a great conversation last night with the folks at Brand Amper in the back, guys. And they said, you know, we can't control the conversation, but we can guide it. We can't control the conversation, we can guide it. The best place for you to start guiding your conversation is through your recruiters because they're the ones that know how that should sound and whether or not it's right or authentic or compelling, if it's going to get a response. So be thinking about the pieces of content, snackable content you can create that your recruiters can be pushing out. They're going to be able to tell you, this thing is great. You heard that earlier today. This piece is tractioning. People are sharing this like crazy. This was a dud. Eventually, your recruiters can help you figure out exactly which pieces are the stickiest so that you can expand that out through your talent brand. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so based on that, I told you I was going to keep it super short. I'm just going to ask how many people are going to think a little bit more about the recruiter brand as a result of this? All right, and I did finish early, which is good, hopefully. So next steps?
Which means that you get to stay and answer some bonus Q&A. So a quick question before we jump to Q&A. I mean, how is this topic of recruiter branding resonating? I mean, most of the people in this room are recruiters. How does this idea, do you understand kind of the importance of this and how we're positioning ourselves? Because when you think about it, there's never been more noise in the marketplace of recruiting right now. Candidates are getting drilled. Because employer branding is emerging, we're getting more sophisticated about content creation. We're getting more volume around content creation. We also have a lot of people who are not very well trained in content creation and are just adding to the noise. So it's never been easier to reach people. It's never been harder to actually cut through the noise and connect with them. And so when you do, your recruiter brand is actually what allows somebody to say, okay, what is this person like? What are their interests? What does your SIG file look in your email? Do you have your Twitter? Do you have your LinkedIn? Do you have links to all of your social profiles? Do you make it easier for people to find out what you're all about? Because ultimately in recruiting is about finding a connective tissue with a candidate. And the easier we make it for them to find something about us that they can connect to and say, you know what? I also went to Florida State University.
Yeah.
Great school, by the way. I also grew up in this town. I also like this book. I also enjoyed this movie, right? That's something that makes us more human and real and normal. Makes it easier to connect with us. Look at something like job descriptions. Job descriptions as a whole are terrible. They're terrible. They're compliance driven. They're overly texty. They don't really tell you what the job does. They're not mobile friendly. I can go on and on and on. But there's lots of ways you can enhance a job description. Why not put the bio of the recruiter working on that job at the bottom of your job description? Why not tell every candidate who's applying your job, hey, this is who's working on this rec. And not only this is their name and their title, but this is a little bit about them. Here's a link to their social profiles. Why not make it that easy for somebody to say, oh, you know what? That person could be interesting. That's another way for them to maybe say, maybe I was going to apply, maybe I wasn't, but actually this person looks kind of interesting. I'd like to have that chat.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that and say, just because the job seekers have gotten more sophisticated, it doesn't mean they're really good salespeople. They still have a lot of angst around reaching out to you. So this is what we're talking about. Make it a little bit easier for them to reach out. They're petrified. The complaint we hear all the time is I never hear back. The candidate big black hole, rejection, all of that. They hate rejection. So they're just trying to minimize the odds by having a more meaningful first interaction with you. And we can give them that. We can give them that.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to open it up to questions in the room. So we have a mic coming around, so we're going to start right here in the middle.
So based on that conversation, the question is, how do you balance the influx of candidates that you don't want and the time that they will use up of your recruiters in very high-tech or engineering-related roles?
Great question. So one of the things that we have people doing is building an auto-generated form or even cut and paste, if you don't have that kind of automation, of a text that can go to an email to any candidate that reaches out to you. And it's really important that you manage their expectations. Hey, I want to let you know we're getting over 300 applicants at a time. I'm probably not going to get to everyone. If you are in the running, you'll hear by within 2 weeks. Give them some framework about what's happening. And then I would also say, if you're not the right fit for this one, you could be for another thing. So hey, follow us over here on Glassdoor. Check back on a regular basis. Feel free to reach out to me proactively. Give them some sort of text in that response so that they can at least feel like I got heard, and give them some guidance on how they can become a better candidate for you. That's what they're looking for. What we're finding is that they really see you as career coaches. Come on, how many of you find yourself career coaching candidates? You know you do, right? And so if you can give them a little career coaching, even if it's in an automated format, offer them resources. I know over at Hootsuite, is it okay if I mention this? At Hootsuite,
sure.
They've totally rethought rejection. Lars has helped them rethink that. They have an email that goes out that literally says, sorry you weren't picked, but hey, by the way, here's some great articles on how to improve your resume, your interview, all these other great resources. Follow us, stay in touch with us. And it works, doesn't it? And they actually get responses back. Gee, thanks a lot. It was nice for you to give me some guidance. So just close that loop on the candidate experience when it comes to that rejection. Thank you for asking that.
And if you want to learn more about that, was actually part of the open source HR initiative at Hootsuite. So we did a case study on that where we actually gave away all the templates that we built So you can go to hros.co and download all that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add on one more thing and say, every time you choose not to respond to candidates in some way, if some of you are saying it's more trouble than it's worth, please think about the earlier conversations today. Those are your consumers. They remember, right? They really remember.
Okay, next question. Right here in the middle.
Thank you. So I have a comment, and my question is really your reactions and thoughts to this. So your presentation, I think, really speaks well to what my company, CINT, is doing with recruiter branding. And the comment is, I think there's a lot of things I hear when I speak with other recruiters. There's not enough talent that's out there. And the comment I actually have is, in our perspective at CINT, is there is a lot of talent out there. It's really how our recruiters communicating with them, and what is the talent actually responding and reacting with. And so my question is really around your thoughts. Do you have a similar perspective? Do you coach recruiters on that? Is that something common that you see as well?
Absolutely. So we know that there's a demographic situation that's about to happen, right? Over 70 million baby boomers are retiring in the next 10 years. There's only 46 million Gen Xers. There's not physically enough people to replace. The next generation coming up are the millennials. We heard about millennial recruiting. So there is a skill gap there, right? We're going to have to onboard them and upskill them. I think you're going to see a lot of companies start to think through how they're going to be able to close those competencies. And I think it's going to have to start with recruiters, figuring out what am I looking for, the personas of our candidates. And maybe they don't have all the hard skills that I need, but they've got the personality and the aptitude and are part of our tribe. And that comes from an exceptional recruiter who gets that, right? And you'll attract, and like attracts like. We heard this. When you up your game in recruiting like this and you start to pull in the right talent, guess what? The sophisticated job seekers tell each other. They tell each other, oh, don't talk to that recruiter. That person, oh, forget it. Talk to that one. And very soon, you don't have to market anymore. How many of you would just like only the best, like really hot candidates reaching out to you, right? That's recruiter branding.
Next question.
Good.
All right, I see no hands, so we're actually going to flip this a little bit. Instead of questions, I want to call on a few people to share some of their best practices. If you have practices within your organization that you think brands your recruiters really well, or success stories to share around that, please raise your hand, because this will give you a chance to share with the room and everybody in the live stream some of the things that your organization is doing. Who's going to be the bold first hand? All right, we have one right here.
Hi, I'm Susan Lindstrom. I work for Gensler, which is an architecture, design, and consulting firm in our Northeast region. One of our recruiters, since we market to creatives, she created an interactive visual job description and an outreach collateral piece that she sends with her in-mails to her candidates, and it's been really well received.
Awesome.
And do you know how she built it by chance?
We used a graphic designer
Cool.
who works for Gensler.
Who else would like to share? We have one up front?
Maybe just old school.
Actually, no, well, we have a live stream audience, so here you go.
Maybe this is just old school, but I try to greet every candidate as they come in the door if I can, and then I try to debrief with them at the end of the interview, at the end of the day, to get their thoughts. And then I always try to send to them PR communication highlights on what's happening on a weekly basis at our company as well. Just simple things.
Nice.
Thanks for sharing. We've got another comment in the back.
I'm from DocuSign, and one of the things we do is when we invite a candidate to come in to interview on site, so they've already passed through the screening calls, in the email with their schedule, we give them a link to a free DocuSign account. So whether or not we hire them, they get a free account.
Love it.
That's great. We have another one here in the front.
Hi, I'm Kristen from Nextiva. We actually have a link for a video where the person who's applying for the position can see about 5 to 10 different people explaining the job so that they have an idea about the personality, and then they also recognize the actual person's face, so when they come in the door, they already feel like they might know that person.
Wow, that's great.
The video? Like, is it on YouTube, or how are you managing the video pieces?
The video is, I believe, a private link, and we use Wistia. I'm pretty sure it's private, so you would only receive it once you applied for a specific position. And then also, when you do hit click when you click submit for the position, you get kind of a fun, cheery video back saying it's not into the ether somewhere, black hole. We got it, we received it, it's in safe hands. We'll reach out to you right away.
Other practices. One other thing that's super easy that I don't think enough of us do, we all have application auto responses when somebody applies to our job. Most of them are the stock boilerplate, thank you so much for applying to our job. We will review your resume at some point. Dear, thank you recruiting, right? It doesn't really tell anybody anything. It's a read receipt, basically. There's not a lot of value in that. You control that messaging. That single email is one of the most valuable candidate experience things and tools that you have to actually set expectations with candidates. When you think about your hiring process, you know the questions that candidates typically have. It's, when am I going to hear back? What is the interview process like? What is the decision process like? The general things, we all have them. It's pretty much the same for most candidates. Why not be proactive and actually add FAQs to your application response? Tell them what's going to happen in the process. You know what's going to happen in the process, and you may not know what's going to happen every time. It's not like most of our organizations don't have strict SLAs that say we're going to get back to a candidate within 7 days. It would be great if we did. Most of us, I'm guessing, don't. That's okay. You can set a range. You can say, here's what happens from here. A recruiter will review your resume. The hiring team will review your resume. A panel will review your resume, whatever your process might be. But it typically takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes longer. Candidates will accept that as long as they know. It's worse when you apply, especially, there's some great employers in this room. People may really aspire to work for your company, and they may be customers. So now they're fired up, they're applying, and they hear nothing. We heard earlier in the session from Dell, that can cost your company millions of dollars potentially. So again, simple hack. Throw some FAQs in there, help set expectations so your job applicants have an idea of what to expect.
I'll just add on that and say that we did a study and 44% said if they didn't hear back from a company, they wouldn't apply there again. Not because they were angry, they made the assumption that you don't want them ever. That's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, especially those dream companies. Come on, we've all had our hearts broken, right? Maybe not by an employer, but when you apply and you wait and you don't hear anything back, it's frustrating, and it's not that hard, especially with the FAQs. That's automated. That really requires an hour of your time to draft that message, right? So simple hack, easy thing to do.
I would just also add that there's this sort of interesting curve that goes on when you start recruiter branding, right? So in the beginning, you're branding to attract talent. You get better and better at the talent you attract. Eventually, you get to a point where you can literally start telling them what you don't want. These are the candidates that will not do well here. This is the kind of person that won't survive here. And when you get to that point, what do? You're deselecting. You're getting the people that wouldn't work there to not contact you, so you get less people applying, but you get the right people applying. And I think that's part of the reason Glassdoor, when we talk about them giving you 2 times the better candidates, we saw that data point this morning, is because you're doing exactly that, aren't you? You're telling them who will survive and who will not survive there, and that's key.
Yeah. More tips. Come on, I know some of you have some things you've been working on you want to brag on. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to the rejection notice, I think we all, if we're in talent acquisition, lead recruiters, need to make sure that we're focusing on the recruiter behaviors. And so one thing that we've talked about is and measuring their performance on the amount of time, the SLAs it takes for them to look at new candidates and either move them to a hiring manager screen, to an HR phone screen, to a rejection. And so we put 72 hours as our goal a year and a half ago, and at that point, we had over 1,000 candidates that weren't being touched in 72 hours, so they weren't getting any type of notice, to now we're down to 70. Wow. So just changing their behavior and setting expectations for them that they need to get through their candidates as quick as possible. I think you don't want to miss out on that. Even though the note's good, you have to actually do something to trip that gate so that candidates are getting those notices.
Yeah. How many people have SLAs in place in their recruiting process around the time that they will get back to candidates? Raise your hand. Handful, okay. So I think, and I'll call myself out on an embarrassing story around candidate experience and getting feedback. When I was running recruiting at NPR, I was monitoring the NPR jobs hashtag or the Twitter handle, and I get a tweet from somebody with a screenshot. It's a screenshot of a rejection template, generic rejection template that we send via iCIMS when we closed out jobs. And it said, Gee, thanks, NPR. Only 15 months later. And so I said, that can't be right. That can't be right. So I, of course, jump into iCIBS, look it up, and sure enough, it was one of those recs that was open, then it was kind of on hold, then it was paused, then there was a new manager, and then it switched teams, and yada yada. The life of that job, it stayed open for 15 months.
Oh.
And we had this group of people that we were not in touch with. And then they got ding notices 15 months later. So on the one side, hey, at least we closed the door. But on the other, it was 15 months. So I actually called that person. I personally apologized. But that was actually, it was a good catalyst for me, because when that happened, that was the nudge I needed to really closely dig into our entire candidate experience process and revamp how we did things, because that's just not acceptable. We can kind of laugh about it now. I was kind of horrified when it came out, especially that's how Twitter is, right? They're gonna share that. So I'll eat a little crow, but that was a good life lesson for me. So we have time for one more tip. Does anybody have one more thing they want to share? Way in the back here.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask one more question. What about LinkedIn? I mean, you have so many applicants in LinkedIn, and mostly I think people do not expect to answer from the recruiter when they apply. What do you expect? Or do they expect? How do you feel about that?
So my personal answer is that, again, this is your brand, right? So, and we live in a shared economy now. You think about Uber, everything, both sides rate each other, right? That is the new normal. That's how it's going to be going forward, especially when it comes to candidate experience. I would say it's something you work towards. You really try to work towards your recruiter brand and your employer brand and your talent brand, all of it being accountable. And that means finding a way to be able to respond there. But I think this is so new and we're having to adapt to it all of a sudden. You've got to pick your battles. So focusing more on the email and creating great email first might be more important for your own portal, and then getting to that later on. But ideally, I would say try to find a way to respond to everyone on all platforms.
Great. All right, everyone, let's thank JT for joining us.
Thanks.